Welcome to Channel 17's continuing coverage of General Election 2018. Election Day is November 6th, and we are getting ready here by bringing you 100 candidates and 31 forums in the month of October. So we're glad you can join us. And today we are with two women who are representatives in Burlington's District 6-5 in Burlington's South End. We have Joey Donovan and Mary Sullivan. Thank you both for joining us.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Now, technically, you're running as Joey Donovan.
Johanna Letty Donovan.
Oh, Johanna Letty Donovan.
Takes up a lot of space on the ballot.
That's right. So there's no room for Joey.
No, there's no quote, Joey.
There you go. Okay, good. So thank you both for being with us. You are both incumbents. You are running unopposed for the two seats. And why don't we just start with reminding the voters why you're running and what qualifies you for the position? And maybe, Joey, you could start.
You know, when I ran for the first time in the year 2000, I thought I would probably serve a couple of terms. It has been really one of the most honorable things I've ever done in my life. I feel very, very fortunate to be able to serve the city of Burlington and Montpelier. I go back again, and it will be for my, I think, 10th term, because there are issues that I've been involved with over the years that still have not happened, and I want to be able to pursue those. I was very disappointed with our governor last year when he vetoed the minimum wage bill and also the paid family leave bill. Paid family leave we've been trying to pass now for more than a few years. It is not a great expense to the taxpayers of Vermont, but it makes sense. I know in my family, I was very grateful that we had the federal paid leave when my husband had illness that I had to leave work. It would have been a lot easier had it been paid. But at least I knew I had a job to go back to, and it gave me time to do the job that I needed to do with him. So I'm going back to finish some of those things that I'm interested in, and I hope that the people of the South End and Hill section of Burlington will agree that I deserve to do that.
Thank you very much. Mary Sullivan.
Thanks, and I really look forward to getting back into Montpelier and working on some of the issues that unfortunately the governor did veto some really, really good pieces of legislation the last time. It won't just be that we'll be working on, but those will be important, and starting I think with paid family leave and minimum wage I think is crucial. When you talk about an affordability agenda, these are two really crucial pieces to make affordability real in Vermont. You can't talk about that and then veto these bills. It doesn't make any sense. I do serve as vice chair of House Natural Resources Committee and co-chair the Legislative Climate Solutions Caucus. Those are issues that I'm very passionate about, and I really want to see the state moving forward so that we start achieving our greenhouse gas emissions goals that everybody says that they're very much in favor. If you have goals without a plan to achieve the goals, they are useless, and that's what I see that is happening a lot. And I think it's very important for people to know that this is not only an environmental, it's also an economic development agenda, that when you spend $1 on fossil fuel in the state of Vermont, 80 cents of that goes out of the state. That is not strengthening our economy at all. So there'll be many issues that I'll be going back and hopefully working on, and I really hope we can get some of these through this time around.
Well, let me segue to the question about climate change that we had prepared, and that question is, are there opportunities in climate change for Vermont? Maybe you could respond to that.
There are a huge number of opportunities, and I think that's where you see the people who are visionary in their legislative approach, that they see these opportunities. They don't just want to do the same old, because that's what we've been doing. And to move toward renewable energy and better farming practices so that you're reabsorbing the carbon into the soils. It strengthens the soil. It's really good for everybody. We know from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that we've been a part of for a while, from a study that was done there, that our air is cleaner, that there's now quantifiable fewer avoidable deaths and lost work time, and so there are a lot of health benefits for getting fossil fuel out of our air.
And then what do you think the opportunities, though, are in climate change when what do you see as the answer to that question?
I see a lot, we have the renewable energy business out there, and that is a real growth industry. We have a lot of young people working these jobs at high salaries, good pay, good benefits. This is where we're going to be growing our economy down the road. And I think it'll be really, and there's a real advantage to kind of getting out there and doing it first and not always lagging behind. I often say to people that we get up on the floor of the House and brag about how Vermont was the first to do this, we were the first to do that. And when it comes to current times, it's like, well, let's not be too much in a rush, let's not be the first. We're proud of our forebears for doing that, and I'd like to see a little bit more of that same attitude in the legislature these days.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I think recently, as recent as last week, I read or heard that top scientists say that we really only have about a 10-year window to really start to be serious about this and start to make the change. And it is unbelievable, as Mary says, that we have a number of climate change deniers in the State House. We certainly have the chief climate denier in Washington, who is sending a message that it's not the crisis that it is. I look to my grandchildren and think it is imperative that we address this. And Mary serves on natural resources, and she's my chief advisor on all issues that have to do with energy and these issues. And I think her statements today were really powerful about why we have to do something.
Remind us what committees you serve on.
I serve on Ways and Means.
Yeah. And tell us, let's talk a little bit about the budget then. We've talked, and maybe the bigger issue of the economy.
We don't do the budget. We just find the revenues to support it.
Exactly. So let's talk about the bigger category of the economy. And how would you characterize the health of Vermont's economy, and what do you think needs to happen, and what role would you play in creating a sustainable future?
Well, I think we had such kind of doomsayers about the state of Vermont. We are a small state. We can't do everything, but I'm so impressed with the commitments that we have taken on to make life a little bit better for others and to find a way to pay for it. I think Vermont is in a pretty good shape. I think the independent entrepreneurs that we have coming to this state are really, really making a difference. I think I'm not sure that we brag about our excellent public education system as much as we should. I would love to see an outreach where we're talking to skiing families that drive up here from Boston or New York to say, why don't you come here? You won't have to pay private school anymore. You can get a public school education. You can live here. You won't have to drive here every weekend. Really put that outreach out about how good the environment, the life, work, genuinely good workers, and great public education that we have. That would be a way to also expand our businesses. But I think overall, I was reading my friend Paul Celo and Jack Hoffman from the Public Assets Institute. I go to their website a lot and read a lot of their materials, and I think they paint sort of a brighter picture of our economic future than sometimes those in Montpelier do.
Let me just ask you before we follow up on the. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to point out that Joey makes an excellent point in the fact that we do have excellent schools here, and we should be celebrating that and supporting it. That's another point where the governor has really been just such a disappointment. For 2 years in a row, he plops these big issues in the legislature very late in the session that we're supposed to be working on. Everybody knows the only way you get good legislation is to get it into committee, really vet it, and get people in to testify. But it seems to be that he really wants to suck so much money out of public education, and we are going to be like other states if we do that. And we brag about the fact that we have really good schools, good public school teachers, and we certainly want to make sure that that continues.
How do you know that we have good schools? What makes you so sure about that?
The way we stack up on national surveys, and Joey might be able
I think
to
we're
answer
usually in the
this.
top 5 of a school due to accreditation. I think the number of successful students we have. I think where we are failing is getting kids to actually follow through. You know, they may go to college for a year and then decide they're going to do something else. That we need to do more on higher education to attract kids and to then retain those kids in those programs. One of the saddest things I have seen is students that go to college for 2 years or so leave without a degree, but leave with debt. And then they're not able to really get the job that pays enough to be able to pay back that debt, and already then they're behind the 8 ball. So I think we need to do better. When we started to have pay for high school kids to take college classes, I was on the education committee at the time, and we really viewed that originally as aspirational for first generation kids. For them to be able to be exposed to a rigorous class, to be able to realize they could do it, they could master that curriculum, and that they had it in them to go to college. And it now has become sort of a general expectation for many high school students to take those classes. And it's one of the things that I was a part of in the legislature that I'm most proud of, that I see kids now who are going to college, and some of them have 6, 8, even 12 credits. And so it saves them money in college, and it gives them a sense of accomplishment and a real good sense that they are good thinkers and are really going to be the next generation of leaders here in the state of Vermont.
So Mary, do you want to just add about your view of the economic state of the economy in Vermont, and do you have specific ideas about building a sustainable economy?
You know, I think that's very closely linked to, you know, looking at climate change and seeing how we can really help our state by changing our economy and keeping up with this. And, you know, if we do that, we have all of these benefits: better jobs, cleaner air. We're out in front by not importing fossil fuel. So I think making sure that as we talk about growing jobs, that it's not like attracting some big corporation from some far-off place to come in and hire lots and lots of people in a certain area, but instead really supporting the entrepreneurs that we have here, and having the state open so that if other entrepreneurs and small business people see Vermont as friendly, they may come here. And growing jobs in that way that it's, you know, it's dispersed, it's Vermont friendly. We're using the resources that we have here. And the Vermont Council of Rural Development, they do an excellent job of really trying to grow jobs in a very sustainable way by, you know, giving very small grants to, you know, a farmer or a restaurant owner that they might start expanding a little bit and go from 2 or 3 employees to 5 or 6. And that, I think, is the Vermont model that we want to really focus on and make sure that we really stay with.
So what kind of issues do you hear from your constituents in the South End? What do they care about? What are they talking to you about?
I think a lot of people are talking about the crisis of opioids and the dangerous situation that it's placing so many people in, and the power of addiction. Mm-hmm. I think we need to commit to finding more treatment spaces and different ways of addressing that situation. We had a young woman whose obituary now has gone worldwide, I think. Her family has been in Burlington for a long time, and many of us are intimately friendly with them. And I think how brave they were to share that personal sorrow, and how open they were to talk about something that people have felt shame before. And I think many of us come from families where there has been addiction. There's been sort of a quiet desperation about it oftentimes. And so I would really hope that health and welfare and different committees that have to do with health will really start to look at that and see what can we do. Is there any impact that we can have on that issue?
Do you think we're having an impact now? There's been a lot of resources and time and administrative design and public safety resources reallocate? Like we've been doing a lot.
And yet we still have a significant problem, I
Is
think.
it going down in Vermont? I mean,
You know,
what are the metrics?
I really don't know. I have not looked
those
at that.
numbers either.
It's something that I think we all need to look at
Yeah.
and do the research that's necessary. What does work? You know, I heard Gary DeCarolis on the radio this morning just talking about places like Turning Point, where there's a safe place for people who have problems with drugs and substance. Because it's been my experience that those folks have to sort of change their lives. They can't go back to be with the people that they had been with, and that's asking a lot. You know, when you're recovering from cancer or some other disease, you still can go back to your friends and the life that you knew. But the power of that, and then the places like Turning Point to offer people the computers, to help write a resume, to just have friendship, to be able to have a cup of coffee. Maybe those are the types of things we need to reach out and develop more of. You know, I'm not sure, but I certainly want to be able to start a conversation about that issue.
And this certainly has shown such a drastic failure of allowing the pharmaceuticals to get away with what they've gotten away with. And, you know, how do we get them to actually be responsible for this crisis that they certainly helped create?
How did they help create it?
By, you know, OxyContin, you know, you have really pushing these drugs and then giving out too many tablets. So you send a high school kid home, they take 2 for what they need, and then there's 28 left over, and they can sell them at the high school. And for some kids, and we've learned certainly from this obituary, who probably have an addictive type of personality, it doesn't take much to become an addict or become a person with addiction. It's, you know, we have let the pharmaceuticals get away with way too much.
What are you hearing from your constituents in the South End?
You know, certainly along with the opioid crisis, that certainly is a topic of conversation. You know, we have water quality issues, and that's a big one. We have that big, beautiful lake that we have not been taking care of for a very long time. And not to be totally critical of everything the governor does, but it was not a fun session last time, for sure, working with him. I don't think he talked about no new taxes, no new taxes. That's all we heard. No new fees, no new taxes. Rather than looking at, is this an investment? I mean, that's how we run our families, our own personal lives, our own finances. We'll spend something to know that it's a good investment so that it will have payback in the future. And there's nothing that will have better payback than starting to clean, getting the funding source so that we really improve the water quality in that lake. It is a gem. I mean, I don't think anybody can imagine living in Burlington without Lake Champlain. You know, those beautiful sunsets that we watch over the lake in the Adirondacks, and, you know, swimming and boating, and, you know, it's part of our life here.
I echo Mary. You know, Julie Moore, who's the secretary of the agency, was in Ways and Means, and we were talking about how to fund the cleanup of the lake. And I have great admiration for her and for the work that she has done. But she was placed in a position where she had to talk about reasons that they can't do it. And I finally had to say to her, it sounds to me is the reason that we can't do it is because of the fact of a campaign slogan, which Mary referred to: no new taxes, no new fees. And I think the governor painted himself into a box with that. I'm hoping that perhaps, I haven't heard him utter that this time around, because, you know, there are real problems, and we're not over there just to, you know, find out a new tax or whatever. But when you have issues as big as cleaning up Lake Champlain, we have to be somehow invested. And I want to also salute Beth Pierce, who did a fabulous study on the cleanup of the lake. And it's probably the best thing that we had to look forward to, or to look at, and to say, kind of start to study some of her suggestions in there.
For funding.
For funding. We even went back, I learned a new word, escheats, which are, they're the bottle returns that don't get taken back so the state gets the money somehow. So we thought, well, we could use some of these sheets.
It's funny, those issues that never go away. When I served in the 90s, we had hoped to get that through back then.
The
I go
sheets.
away for 14 years and I come back and it's like, oh yes, we never did that, did we?
Yeah.
So what was it that Beth Pierce had suggested as a funding mechanism that was not adopted?
I think part of it was a parcel fee.
Yeah.
And I think we now have GPS mapping that can probably do that better. I think we have mapping now that can show where there are non-pervious things, and we have big parking lots outside of shopping centers, and all sorts of places that we could say, here is the map. This is what, and you should probably be somehow taxed on that, or pay some fee.
And cutting off that runoff is so important. We've got to be able to. We don't want to just be cleaning up. We want to be cutting off the runoff from. We did start the regulation of small farms, which is crucial. It should have happened before. There's a lot of elements that go into making the lake dirty, but you cannot be having this phosphorus just running off because you're a small farm, and so that seems like the farmers have come on board, and
they have. I think we had a discussion. I think before you came back to the legislature on riparian buffers, that farmers would have to put some sort of a buffer between that and any stream that went through the land. And I can remember I thought it was a very simple debate, and we were there 4 hours later, and it became a private property discussion, and that the state had no right, to impose that on anyone. I don't think we have that same viewpoint
I don't
today
think we do
in the
either.
Legislature.
And when you're polluting a public good like that, that's what it's about. It's not whether you have a right to your own privacy and whatever, if nothing you do impacts someone else or something else. But that's a different debate when it certainly does.
I'm prompted to this question because at the governor's debate last night, I think it was Emily Payton recommended growing marijuana in those buffers as a way to absorb phosphorus. So so the question that comes to mind is, what's your view on the legalization of marijuana that's taken place? Do you think the state should go further? What's your view on this?
I was a supporter of legalization. First of all, I think any issues around drugs should become a health issue and not something that we deal with in courts. But aside from that, it seemed like our medical marijuana list was growing and growing every year, and I'd hear people talk about how they use it for this thing or they use it for that, and I'm thinking, well, this is in place of prescription medication. I think that's a good thing. But I do think we also, I would like to see us move to regulation and taxation of it, as I believe Massachusetts and Quebec are in the process of doing.
I agree with Mary. I'm a strong supporter of legalization of marijuana. It does not make sense to me that we legalize alcohol and do not legalize marijuana. I also have never heard of anyone smoking a joint and going home to beat their wife up. It happens on a daily basis with alcohol. I think the law that we passed, I think, is simplistic. It's foolish. I thought it was an extremely small step. And I think, and I'm hoping that there'll be some leadership to expand it, and that we now, when we have Quebec, which is in business, and Massachusetts and Maine is certainly also going forward, that we do start to sell it legally, tax it legally, and make some money off it. When we first had that study a number of years ago, I think the amount that we were going to be able to make if we legalized marijuana that next session, which was not in the realm of possibility, was $35 million. I'm sure it'd be less now. But again, and I'm sure much of it would be going to health and it would be going to education, which are two wonderful places for it to go. But I think the time has come. I think marijuana was demonized many years ago in Washington, and it needs to come out of the shadows now. We need to recognize
And as I was kind of doing my due diligence, when I was, you know, I was definitely leaning in support of it, but I was talking to a lot of people and talked to a lot of young people and asked, okay, you were in high school recently. If you wanted a drug, would you have known where to go? Even the kids who never ever used it said, well, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'd rather have a system where we're not exposing them to really bad people and bad things. And
dangerous things now with the fentanyl and all that other stuff that they're lacing it with.
Are they lacing marijuana with fentanyl?
I heard that you can. There's a problem that you can have that issue. And I guess for those people that I know that do use marijuana, they have a relationship with their dealer, and they know who they're
Yeah, I mean, I think people who imbibe know how to get it. So that's sort of one of the questions is, I'm not sure you can lace marijuana with fentanyl, but let me just...
I'll have to check on that. I'll do some deeper research.
Let me just ask you, sir, we have four more minutes left. I imagine you're not fans of the federal government at this time, or the people that are running it. Perhaps
certainly not.
That might be more specific. So what do you see as your role as a legislative leader in a state like Vermont in this time where you don't agree with a lot of the decisions that are coming out of D.C.? What can you do, and what can the state do?
You know, it's interesting. Last year I introduced a resolution that would have changed the way the president just has the sole access to the nuclear codes, that it would have to be more of you know, a few people consulting and making a decision like that. And people in the legislature, there's always some who, if it's an issue they don't want to push through, says that's none of our business. It's all our business. You know, every public policy issue that we have, either at the state or the federal level. And I hope that if this man in the White House, you know, I'm sure he will continue doing the awful things he's been doing, that we continue to speak up. I'm very, very proud of our congressional delegation. I think all three of them are doing a fabulous job at really being leaders and being the moral leaders that we need. That lack of morality at the federal level is appalling to me.
Joey?
I think that what we can do here is work hard to maintain the civility and the types of legislation that we've done for the time that I've been there, which really impact Vermonters in positive ways. It is appalling, the situation we have in Washington. I'm hoping beyond hope that November 7th will bring a bright day, that perhaps Democrats have taken over the House of Representatives, and so that there will be some sort of accountability. I believe there can be a lot of questions that could be asked at that time from the president's taxes. I think the most recent thing that's just so offensive is his lack of reaction to this horrible, by every account, murder of this Saudi Arabian reporter. And again, at a rally last night, he applauded somebody who had physically assaulted a reporter. He has such disregard for the press and for other people that are really functional in our democracy. So I don't know what I'm going to do the 7th of November if we don't have that tide and that change.
We're counting on it.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today.
Well, it's gone by.
I know. We have Joey Donovan, Johanna Letty Donovan, and Mary Sullivan, who are both representatives of Burlington South End, legislative representatives in our House for District 6-5. Thank you so much for joining us, and please stay tuned here for Channel 17's continuing coverage of General Election 2018. And we'll see you November 6th for live general election results. Thanks.